of the company and take that risk, then it's hard to keep moving up the ladder and get more broad roles in corporate America.
Yeah.
I'm not as familiar with these roles, with the dynamics that happen in some of the other places in the world.
Sure.
I'm working globally. My background certainly is U.S. companies.
So we were talking before we started the show as well about kind of the history of how the jobs for women have evolved over time, and you made some interesting reference to the fact that back in maybe you should tell the story about how you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about how many women are in technology in the U.S., and I think you said, what was the percentage? 20,
I think it was 27% or 37%, somewhere. It's a very small number compared to other industries.
Well, what's interesting is that back in the 70s, it was actually much closer to parity in the U.S. than it is today. More women came into software development, out of, the computational roles that they were serving in companies. And then it wasn't until the 80s that we really started seeing a drop-off of women in technology, and in particular computer science in school. And I think it's fascinating. I don't know if it's true or not, but there's definitely correlative information and data here, because you start seeing advertisements in the 80s that are gearing computers to boys and making it gendered.
Yeah. So I'm gonna pause you there for a second, Mary, because actually I've got something I'm gonna pull up on the screen, and then we'll tell people that are listening on Spotify or the other podcast channels, but for those who are watching can see this. So I've got a few adverts that actually support that for you. The first one is from Apple. I apologize, Apple, but it's clearly marketed toward boys getting new PCs, where it's how to buy a personal computer, and it's, mom and dad sitting in the background with all this crazy, old school tech, with the sales guy with the little Apple, shirt on there, the little boy sitting there looking at the computer and touching the keyboard going, oh, wow, look what I can do. And it's very much, boy-centric. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So that's one. Let me just, I'll pause that for a second. I'm going to go and show you another one now, which I think is even funnier, just to give you an idea of what, Apple's idea was. So here's the other one, which I find really amusing. It's a picture of Adam from Adam and Eve with a snake behind him, and he's covering his genitals with a PC.
It's a giant computer.
With a giant computer, because you wouldn't be able to hide his manhood with an iPhone 5. So. And it says, we're looking for the most original use of an apple since Adam. I mean, it's a huge concept of the Adam and Eve with the Adam and the apple, but where's Eve?
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, I know that there have been girls in some of the ads, but my understanding is that a lot of the TV ads were looking at how do you, directing people to buy computers for their boys, never directing them to buy computers for girls. Mm-hmm. It's not like there weren't girls in some of the ads, but those sorts of things are messages that we hear as a culture and that we start believing. And even if we're not paying attention to them in some explicit way, the subtlety of it sinks in. And I mean, the numbers reflect that sort of change. In the 80s and the 90s, we saw fewer and fewer women going into comp sci roles, comp sci programs in schools. Yeah. And now we talk about the differences in percentages who are applying for jobs. Well, that's a direct relationship back to who was actually going to school to learn how to, not just how to code, because, I find it interesting that it's the engineering schools, it's the comp sci schools where we see the biggest drop down in women participating. People become programmers in lots of different ways. I know that with the later kind of code school groups that have come about, that more women are going to code schools, and that's a different form of developer. Right. Very needed in the world. We have to fill jobs, and those people are great at filling jobs. I even went to a code school because I wanted some refresh on some technology, and I knew I wasn't going to do it by myself sitting at home, because I was too busy when I was at home. Yeah. So I use that sort of thing. I get it. It's great. But how do we get more women really going for comp sci? I mean, we've got great brains. We think well. I mean, cryptography seems like a great thing for women to be in.
Better at multitasking than we are.
Yeah.
I mean, Mary knows how flustered I get if I have to like send a calendar invite and I'm switching between like my calendar and my email. I can't do it. It's just like it's not in my nature. And Yuri always laughs at me like, just use your automated email thing, Steve, because you're terrible at sending invites.
I'm going to call you out there. By you saying I'm better at that because I'm a woman, that's the same argument.
Well,
I'm no better at multitasking than a man, and a man is no better at multitasking than me. Now, I may be better than you.
Yeah, that might be the case. I thought there was research done about the fact that women are better generally at hear, like for example, that generally women can hear multiple things happening at the same time, and men can only listen to one thing at a time.
Yeah, but why?
People in general.
What's that?
Is that because of our gender, or is that because we have more practice?
I don't know because I think it's like when I talked to my wife about it, she's able to like, take in information from 2 kids and me, and she heard everything all at once. And I'm just like, I can't hear everything at once. I have to hear one thing at a time. And when I studied psychology, I remember that these were topics that came up about there were gender differences in the way our bodies are designed because women are mothers and they have to be able to multitask on information flow. Whereas for whatever reasons, maybe the way our bodies are developed.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I'm just saying it's what I learned in my psychology.
Right. No. I was in those psychology classes too. I was a psych major actually in college.
So was I. Yeah. Yeah. But I
just question whether or not it's social. Like part of the problem with all of these
socialized rather than true, right?
Mm-hmm. Which issues are caused by socialization and which issues are caused by it's the nature nurture.
I totally agree with that. It's very possible.
And so we don't really know. We don't know if we get better at these things when we're 5 years old, when we're 1 year old, when we're 25 years old. We don't know when those things are really happening. We can test it, but we can't tell why.
Right.
It's really not predictable in that sort of way. And to the focus sort of thing, I don't know.
Well, there's something else to be said as well, which is if it's kind of like that self-fulfilling prophecy. If women keep saying you're not good at multitasking to men, then of course it's the same thing, and we all believe we're not good at multitasking, right? But that's not saying it's true. It's just socialized, and that's what you're saying. I agree with that. Maybe we're socializing certain things into our society that are leading us to believe in something which isn't true.
Well, certainly priming is exactly that. I mean, there's lots of studies that show in the U.S. in particular, where there already is a cultural assessment about women not being as good at math or not being as good at science, that if you remind them before they take a test that there's this cultural belief, they will do more poorly in taking that next test. Wow. And if you don't remind them, they do much better.
It's amazing how bias affects our behaviors in ways that we can't even control. Sometimes we just naturally respond to it, although we know it's not true. And it's incredible how our brains do this to ourselves.
Yes.
We're such self-destructive creatures.
But we're also very creative and innovative, so.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's why we're talking about crypto, right?
Yeah.
Innovations.
So, Mary, where do you see the crypto space headed? You're deep in it right now and running a very exciting company. Where do you see things headed in 5-10 years from now? What gets you excited?
Well, I'm biased. I'm running a particular kind of company that is a little different than a lot of crypto companies, because the sort of currency that we're really promoting and designing and working on is one that we think will be transformative. So currently, most crypto is token-based, and we are talking about doing a mutual asset-backed currency, which just functions completely differently in the world. And we think that function actually has the potential for changing patterns in a way that current crypto doesn't. Like the current crypto world, to a certain degree, is replicating the patterns of money, fiat money. They're just doing it in ways that are anonymous.
Right.
And they're doing it in ways that are, algorithmic. But if you look at some of the centralization patterns even around crypto, sure, it started out with different people having it and different people exchanging it and building value through mining. Yeah. Absolutely. It wasn't the traditional holders of fiat money, but little by little, there's been a centralization of who can afford to mine, how big of a mining project can somebody put together, and then there's basically those same patterns of money begets money begets money. Mm-hmm. And that is a centralizing pattern. And what we're looking to do with a different kind of cryptocurrency, an asset-backed currency that is fundamentally running on a distributed platform and running with distributed asset kind of at its base, is that doesn't have to be replicated, that we actually can have value be distributed and the exchange of value stay distributed. So that's what we're looking for, and that's one of the things I'm hoping to see really shift in the patterns of crypto in the next 5 to 10 years.
What kind of assets are you referring to when you describe assets? It's not just fiat. You're talking other assets as well?
No. So with Holo, so I know that we've talked a little bit about, you guys had David Atkinson on the podcast before, and he talked a little bit about Holochain, and I'm not sure how much he talked about Holo. And Holo really is the first large-scale application of Holochain. And what it is a distributed hosting cloud network, essentially. So a little bit like Airbnb is with people who have houses and people who are looking for someplace to stay. Mm-hmm. Holo allows people to host applications and sort of be a node in the cloud, essentially. And then you have app providers who are basically coming out and putting their application that they want made available to people on the internet on all of these various Holo hosts. Okay, right. So it's a marketplace, essentially, but it has a currency built into it, and that currency, Holo Fuel, is actually backed by the capacity of the network. Mm-hmm. So in this particular instance, its hosting capacity is the asset. In other instances, because we've got other people who are building on Holochain right now, food is the asset, or energy is the asset.
Okay,
and cool. Vision is all of these different asset-backed currencies coming in and then having interoperability between those asset-backed currencies.
Wow, that's so cool.
That's exciting. That is. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, that's really. I'm just going to talk about something completely different. So I pulled up your website, and I see that you used to be involved with some women football clubs. So just tell me a little bit about that, because you seem to have a lot of interest when I'm looking at your interest in sports. You're interested in software development, interest in being involved with women in football. So just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah,
we're going to close it out anyway, because we move off of technology and a little bit back to you, which is kind of more.
Yeah.
Put you on the spot now.
So I grew up in Spain. So when we say football, let's be clear, we're talking soccer in the U.S.
Right. Sorry, I'm in London, so I meant football. I meant soccer, American soccer, worldwide football, but American soccer. That's right.
Right, exactly. So I decided, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago, I decided, I'm wanting to kind of shift into a new way of being in my body, and I started doing all sorts of different activities that I might have done when I was younger, and one of them was soccer. And I said, great, I want to play soccer. Let's look around and find a league. There's a women's league. I'll start a team. Because everybody who wants to play soccer just say, I'll start a team.
Yeah.
So I did, and it was called Optimist United. And it was fantastic, amazing group of women. When I first started, I just started telling everybody, I've used Craigslist, I started telling all these women. It was right after the women's team in the U.S. had won the World Cup. And so there was a lot of excitement around women's soccer in that moment. And so I put together a team, and, I said, well, we'll be optimists. We might not be good, but we'll be optimistic. And that's kind of how it went. It was a league for fun.
What did you guys do?
Depends on the year. Some years we did terribly. The first year I had a lot of pulled muscles.
You had a lot of fun. You won some games, you lost some games, and you had a great experience. And
we've never been at the top of the ranks. I'll say that.
Oh, that's okay. You're optimistic.